Reflecting on this passage from the Gospel of Luke, Fred Craddock writes, Luke places the Nazareth visit first, not because it was first chronologically, but because it was first programmatically. Luke places the Nazareth visit first because it is first, not chronologically, but programmatically. That is to say that this event announces who Jesus is, of what his ministry will consist of, what his church will be and do, and what will be the response to both Jesus and the church. I think it's easy for us to often sort of get stuck on the beautiful imagery of this story, the context in which it's all happening, the vision of the hometown boy coming back and making good and standing in front of the gathered people in the synagogue, the pride of a community in seeing one of their own open and choose a passage to read from the sacred Jewish scrolls, the pride in seeing how he read it clearly and powerfully, and how he, unlike many preachers, knew he had made his point and then just sat back down. He didn't go on and on as some of us are apt to do. The pride is there, and that imagery is so tempting for us, so relatable. Because who amongst us has not felt that same feeling when it's our child, or a child of the church, who has returned and stands up here on the chancel and reads, or plays an instrument, or sings? The image of them up front, standing and doing their best to proclaim the good news through word or silence or music. It's so powerful that it doesn't even matter if they read the words right in the scripture, or if they hit all the right notes in the music, or sing on key. It just doesn't matter what passage they read, or how accurately they pronounce the names of the Bible. What we remember in those moments is the image of them standing and leading and being present, having returned to the worshiping community. I think that's a healthy and a faithful response for one of our own. It is a sign of our unconditional love and support for everyone in our midst, regardless of technical musical proficiency or clarity of speech, or for that matter, for their ability to physically stand in front of the congregation. Because we know that the desire to please God and to bring forth the good news to the gathered community does, in fact, please God. And it does bring forth the good news to the gathered community. But we do ourselves a disservice when we read this passage of Jesus in the synagogue, returning to his home synagogue in Nazareth. We do ourselves a disservice when we read this passage through the same lens. Because Luke places the Nazareth visit first because it is first, not chronologically, but programmatically. That is to say, it announces who Jesus is. The words Jesus chose to read matter so much more than the normal feeling of one of our own has returned and is with us. Let's listen again to the setup of the story of Jesus reading in the synagogue in Nazareth. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written. Note that Jesus chose what he wanted to read. Jesus chose his passage. And he used this opportunity to show what he was about to do. The Lord has anointed me, first, to bring good news to the poor, second, to proclaim release to all who are held captive. Third, to bring sight to the blind. Fourth, to proclaim the year of the Lord's love. And he sat back down. And in case anyone had misunderstood what he had just done, he added, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." This is the first ministry story in Luke's gospel. Not because it was chronologically the very first thing that Jesus did. It's first because Luke wanted to make it abundantly clear why Jesus was here. But it's almost as if Luke knew that the context of the story of Jesus returning to his own people and their pride in one of their own was going to overwhelm this message of release to the captive and good news to the poor. And so Luke followed this story with what we're going to read next week and talk about next week, when the people drive Jesus out of town to the edge of a cliff and try to throw him over it. Luke practically screams in pairing these two stories together that we have to focus on why Jesus is here. And he actively works to get rid of the feel-good part of the story, of the homecoming part of the story, by showing the people trying to throw Jesus off a cliff. Jesus' choice of passages proclaimed why he was with us. I'm a member of the conference consistory for the Pennsylvania Southeast Conference of the United Church of Christ. Our conference. 2 years ago, the Penn Southeast Conference began conversations with the Penn Northeast Conference for a possible merger between the two conferences. Last fall, the delegates to the Penn Northeast Conference voted almost unanimously to merge the conferences. The following week, only 54% of delegates in Penn Southeast Conference voted in favor of merging. And since the resolution needed a 2/3 majority to pass, the motion failed. In the aftermath of that vote, I watched a TED Talk by a guy named Simon Sinek. His talk is called "How Great Leaders Inspire Action." And it proposes that the key for any organization or any business is to be clear on the why of its work. And the why can't be to make money, because that's a result. That's not why we do things. That is a result of what we do. If a club or a business or an organization can clearly articulate, though, why it exists, Sinek argues, it's then pretty straightforward to discuss how to achieve our goals or what to do next. It's a good speech. It's worth watching. But Sinek is just the latest in a long string of people to participate in the popular American pastime of reminding people that we need to be very clear on our purpose in life. Sinek's is the third most watched presentation of the TED series. Rick Warren had a popular bestseller called The Purpose-Driven Life. Before him, M. Scott Peck influenced generations with The Road Less Traveled. All, in their own way, began with this question of why. Why are we doing what we do? Why are we the way we are? The Pennsylvania Southeast delegates who had spoken against merging the conference said over and over that they didn't understand why we were doing this. And without a clear understanding of why it made sense to merge these conferences, they began to insert their own theories and their own suspicions and their own anxieties. I suspect we've all seen that happen before. When people don't have a clear understanding of of why their company or their municipality or their church is doing something, or why it's proposed something. They come up with their own answers. Their guess as to why it's happening may not be accurate, it may not even be grounded in reality, but it's not their fault. They're just filling a void that should have been the very first thing that was said. Today's story is the first ministry story in Luke's gospel, not because it was chronologically first, but because Luke wanted to be abundantly clear why Jesus was on earth. In a little while, we'll have our annual congregational meeting. We'll review a bunch of what and how topics, what we did last year, what we spent, what we propose for this year, how we'll do things differently, how we'll keep things the same, what we have learned, and what we might yet need to learn. But we also need to be abundantly clear on why we do what we do. It's not enough to say, to share the good news of Jesus Christ. That's a result. That's a result. By why, I mean, why does our little church at 440 Bethlehem Pike exist? Why should anyone care that we're here? Why do we gather and laugh and eat and cry and argue and give and celebrate and volunteer and share and envision and water and prune and plant and color and teach and sing and renovate and speak and listen and do everything that we do together? Call me crazy, but I believe that our why, our mission, should be guided by Jesus' why, Jesus' mission. Why are we here? Because we believe that God works through us to bring goodness to the economically poor, as well as uplifting those whose spirits are poor. Why are we here? Because we are sent to release those who are captive to their own self-doubt, to release those who are captive to false gods of economic or patriarchy or violence, to release those who are captive to oppressive forces of racism, anti-Semitism, or homophobia. Why are we here? Because we are to let the blind see how their actions impact others for good or for ill. To let the blind see how their choices enhance or damage God's creation. Why are we here? Because we are to embody the year of the Lord, a year of forgiveness, overcoming bitterness, a jubilee year of rest and silence in the midst of our hectic and loud lives, a year of love that guides our actions towards ourselves, others, and creation. We will still do the work of the church. We will still have a lot of what to talk about. But why? Let's start there. Today, may this scripture be fulfilled in our hearing and in our living. Amen.